A quick shout out to We Got Your Mac. It is a fantastic podcast I'm listening to at the moment, brought to you by SHI. And they explore the world of Mac adoption in the enterprise and discuss the amazing benefits and unique challenges that come with it. So tune into We Got Your Mac wherever you listen to your podcast, or visit wegotyourmac.com. There's a treasure trove of episodes and valuable resources over there. So please don't miss this opportunity to gain insights and make more informed decisions, especially if you're looking to embrace the power of the Mac. Welcome back to the Tech Talks Daily podcast, where every day we explore the latest in technology and its real-world application. I'm your host, Neil C. Hughes, and today we're going to be joined by the VP and GM of Machine Learning at Alteryx. Our guest, Asa, is going to bring a unique perspective on how companies can truly benefit from AI technology through proper utilisation and trust. And we'll also discuss the gap between expectations and reality in AI adoption, and how businesses can navigate this transformative technology. But enough for me. Buckle up and hold on tight as I beam your ears all the way stateside, where Asa is waiting to join us today. So a massive warm welcome to the show. Can you tell everyone listening a little about who you are and what you do?
Pleased to be on the show. Thanks for having me. So just for anybody I haven't met, my name is Asa Whillock. I am the Vice President and General Manager of Machine Learning and Artificial Intelligence. And my role really is to bring the best of machine learning and particularly AI in this last year and a half, where it's really coming toward the Alteryx community. Alteryx is really focused around putting, our tagline is analytics for all. So putting that analytical capability, the best of, into a broad base of customers' hands. Analysts, those who, we need sort of traditionally a low-code, no-code approach, but that's something that we've been expanding. I think we like to focus on things like democratization of tech. We want everybody to have the power of understanding the shape of data, understanding how to analyze it, and that extends very naturally into the AI world these days. So that's my week.
Well, it's a pleasure to have you on the podcast today. And of course, we're getting towards the end of 2023, and if there's one thing that's dominated conversations, it has to be generative AI. And there are so many misconceptions versus the reality, and there's so much hype. So I'm curious, what are the most common misconceptions about generative AI among businesses that you've came across, and how do they differ from the actual benefits that AI offers?
I think the one that if we're highlighting misconceptions, right, the one that sticks with me the most is one that I think has been true, not just of AI. If you take us back just to any new technological breakthrough, I have a great member of the team who refers to it as the static lump of work fallacy, right? And it comes back to a new technology comes for a new thing, and then we all get, really naturally and in a human manner concerned that, well, there's only so much work to do. So if this takes on part of the work, what's going to happen? And I think it's very human. I think we all feel it, but I don't think it's ever really played out when you look at the historical record that's been the case. My favorite quote back to this one is when they invented the phonograph. John Philip Sousa was like, well, that's it for live music. We're done. And it just doesn't really rationalize what ends up extending themselves is that becomes the new pace, the new way of doing things. And if anything, there's not just the same, but more to do. And so when I think about the powers that we work with every day in AI and ML, I really don't buy into the misconception that that the jobs are going to go away, that things are going to change. I think that's mistaken. I think that the expectation we should have is what took us 3 weeks in the past might take us 3 days or 3 hours. And the where we should really aim our sights is what are the components of that work that frankly we didn't care about, that was monotonous, that was a necessary element of the machine that can now be replaced with rarefying the creative spirit that goes into it. So that's the first. And it's one that leaves me feeling very optimistic of like, oh, great, I get to do the parts of my job that I like the best more if we do this right. So that might be one. And then the second is more particular to the function that we play, right? Again, Alteryx is really about, hey, how do we broaden the amount of individuals who work in the enterprise who have access to understanding the shape of data as broadly as possible? And when I joined Alteryx, the thing that I learned the most relevant is that there is a disposition, I think, with many that they look at AI and ML and they say, great, I need to have that one. But then once you unpack that a little bit further, often you'll look into it and they say, you know what, maybe AI and ML is for somebody else. Maybe it's not for me. Maybe it's for the data scientist who went to university for that. Maybe it's for, this particular person who's geeked up on it. But I work in tax. I work in HR. I work in internal audit. I work in this function. And when we spent a little time, we said, well, tell us about your day-to-day life. Tell us about what you do. We talked to someone who said, well, my job in regulatory and tax is to look over this broad set of data that we've got, figure out where we've got some problems with it. I've got 2 or 3 people who can run down those problems and then come back and set us in a better disposition, talking about. And I said, that's an AI problem. They said, no, it can't be. I said, yeah, no. What you're talking about is you've got an ocean of data you got to sift through. Yeah. And then we've got to figure out, well, what's the best way to work within that data? What are the patterns that emerge? What are the tools that we can use to allow us to really efficiently deliver our resources to that? Because you talk about the modern moment, who doesn't resonate with the moment of saying there's a lot of work to do and not a lot of resources to go over. And when you recognize that, everything becomes, at some level, applicable for that ML and AI world. And I would love to replace the view of ML and AI is not for me with, every role is done right.
It's so refreshing to hear you say that. And I think every business leader has been on a journey of some sort this year. Maybe they were blindsided in the beginning. Maybe they thought it was over high. But now as we go into 2024, I think there's a big realization that people need to start paying attention and getting on board and embracing and adopting this technology. But in your experience, what are the main challenges businesses are facing in understanding and effectively implementing AI technologies? Because it's a big learning curve for many of them, isn't it?
Yeah, that's certainly the case, is that getting to a state where they can really be efficient in picking this up has been elusive. So when you talk about learning curve, right, or the knowledge gap that goes into it, I think one of the things that we underestimate is we kind of get into this disposition of, okay, there's going to be a lot of AI tools, AI-driven sort of, and there's heaps. Every day I get these really amazing media publications and vehicles and individuals come. I've got a tool that does X, Y, and Z, and that's exciting. But what we haven't necessarily seen yet is an enormous uptake of those tools. There for sure are patterns that we're starting to see emerge. Okay, AI is deployed here, like AI for code generation has been really taking off. AI for analytical, where we live in our world, has been seeing a lot of track. But you've got a broad basis of this application that we all saw. And so what is left a few of us scratching our heads is, well, why hasn't that translated overnight into the different ways that we do business? And I think what's starting to emerge is, if we really are about making this available ubiquitous, as in everyone's tools have the capabilities that are enriched by this, it translates for you into the spoken language, or it manages to knock down some of the barriers between getting data silos, or any of the different ways that you can apply this tech, then by that rationale, where you're going to find yourself is where the tools you use already every day, the tool that's in your hand, has to get better for you to gain value. Otherwise, your value proposition is, well, I'm going to go to this person who works every day in whatever the tool happens to be. HR is Workday or Indeed. Sales, maybe it's Clary. If you're in analytical world, maybe it's Alteryx. And they know those tools like the back of their hand. It's what lets them do their job. They love it. They utilize it every day. Those are the tools that have to get faster and easier to use for them to gain that benefit, where the knowledge gap really becomes minimal. It just becomes about, hey, this thing got easier for me to use. Why would I not use it? Right? It got easier for me to write code. I think that's why GitHub Copilot has seen such an embrace. GitHub was already extensively used, and it just got better. So when you get down to some of the gap, I think we can't leave a distance to go where they say the AI tool is over there. If only you'll go take a 7-mile hike to go to it and then try it out, you'll find it much better. I think most of the time, we're just too busy for that. We love the idea, but it's hard to get out unless you're an immense enthusiast and go, yeah, I'm going to go play with things that are at distance from where I live. It's got to be the tool in your hand that evolves into that direction.
And there has been a lot of talk this year around AI hallucinations and building trust in AI. So I'm curious, how crucial is trust in this successful adoption of AI within organizations? And what would you say are those key factors in helping to build that trust?
I think it's vital. Right?
Yeah.
I mean, like you just do not have an application of this technology without the trust that's involved. I think, especially because of its nature, its capability, we're well set up to have a moment of pause to say, hey, how do we know that this is right? How do we know that this is something that we can put in front of our customers or our employees? How do we gain confidence in that?
so that we, take all the things that we've built together and we don't, challenge that. We don't challenge our customer brand. We don't put those in dispositions where we see the negative sides of technology, because they exist and I think they need to be treated. And that trust is what's going to engender us to get to that point. But what does that really look like? To me, it comes down to really three things that I think the leading organizations are doing or have done, which set them up for success already. And the first I've mentioned a couple of times, which is understanding the shape of data. There is just no way, if you're a part of a existing organization today, where you're going to ask an AI a question and it's going to give you an answer, that you're going to know that that's right without having some sense of the data that drove it in the first place. You need to understand what is the shape of your organization's data already. So you can go, oh yeah, that makes sense. Works for me. All right, good. Let me then allow, a few more people to get access to this, expand it out and work from there. Or you can go, you know what, there's just no way. There's no way that that's right. Something's up about that. And it's in the absence of that understanding of the data that you put into the system where the real problems can lie, where you can end up in a circumstance where you take something as truthful because you trust the technology, but you didn't necessarily forearm it well, or you didn't understand the technology itself well enough to say, no, this isn't the right one. And that breaks into number two, which is once you've got the data in the spot where you understand it well enough, not every bit and byte everywhere, but well enough that you understand, generally speaking, where things are situated. Then I think, and this is one that I say with a little care, you have to take AI off the pedestal. And I think it's enormously powerful. I mean, I and our teams invest our entire career about it. We believe in it, but that doesn't mean that you should put it into a disposition where you trust that what it brings forward automatically is just correct, or that you don't understand it from a practical level. I think sometimes it's treated as foreign to our understanding. And then there's some elements to that are fair, right? In terms of, the neural network architecture that backs it is not always easily explicable. Some of the technologies for doing explainability haven't caught up with it. It's not always super easy to pinpoint exactly why an AI said. But that said, those technologies are rapidly advancing. They make great breakthroughs. I love some of the things about providing references to some of the original sources. I love the RAG, the RAG pattern for arming AI for your listeners in terms of what they do. And every day new advances come forward that say, if you employ this technology, your utilization of the service gets a little bit better, gets a little bit easier to understand. One of the things that gives me a lot of hope is 2024 is shaping up to one where we start to see productivity take the place of really just standing in awe of this capability. And that will be really effective for generating trust, because I think that it's pretty natural for some of us to look at those who are looking at the technology in awe and say, yeah, it's hard to be confident when awe is part of it. You've got to get to a state where we know what it's doing. And the last one I'll touch on is just embrace regulation, policy, and technical controls. This is our path through. And I'll diagnose this a little bit further along when we get into some topics like responsible AI. But this is really a vital one to engendering that trust.
It does feel, though, at the moment that the majority of businesses are still in that exploring or even experimental phase with AI. And is this what you're still seeing? Is that changing? And what do you think it will take to reach that optimizing or innovating stage? Is that something we're going to inevitably see next year?
Yeah, absolutely, Neil. If your listeners get a chance to take a look at it, there's a great survey that Alteryx put out called the Generative AI Survey. And it breaks this down in detail, which is that true enough, most customers, and this has been verified by most technologists or companies out there, are in a position where they've gotten started. They've put some things into experimentation. Those experiments are starting to yield some fruit, but they're not yet at a point where they're saying, this is a part of how we generally do business in production. This is something that we've done many iterations on. We're optimizing. We're steps away from that. And the response I have to that one and why is it's kind of it's a bit more cheeky, which is that value still takes work. It still takes effort to mature something that really goes into production. And we should be grateful for that in some sense, which is that I think we had a moment earlier where it's just like success is instant and easy, and the game is completely changed. I think that when you take a step back to it, no AI is better than the data that goes into it. And when I spend time with CDOs and CDAOs and CIOs, I think it gave a lot of them pause to recognize for a moment that as awesome as these AIs are, that they're fed from a system that some of them have gotten in amazing order. But many, and they said this to me, were living in a situation where they have been operating off of data scaffolding for years.
And they've rebuilt that scaffolding 5, 6, 7 different times for the next project, the next. And what they never got the opportunity to do was to set their foundation truly in order, where they said, I'm confident in this data. I know where it comes from. I know how it derives in lineage. I know what we can do with it. And I can forearm with self-service, 1,000 people to interact with this thing. I think they would love to all say that. And now that the moment has gotten bigger and bigger, I think many of them are taking that, let's just call it a slight moment to say, we've got to get this in order. The last thing I want to do is just extend that scaffolding one more time into this extraordinarily powerful and convincing system that ultimately that still though is no better than that data. So that system has to. And so my expectation is, that's going to be a key part of that pattern, is that they're doing the work to start to build that foundation back up. And that will help them get through the real value orientation and the hard work to get this into production.
And for any business leader listening that has been talking at length about wanting to be a part of, or even questioning what is our AI narrative, how are we going to include this in our business, how do they move from that almost FOMO-driven approach to something more strategic, thoughtful, when thinking about implementing AI? Because that's a mistake that so many make, isn't it?
Yeah, it's really hard to deal with the FOMO disposition. Yeah. I think if you lived the last year at any organization, you felt a lot of that one. You really did. It felt for a period of time you really couldn't afford to fall behind in this particular discussion. And, that I think a lot of really practical steps were taken. I think people were wise about it. But when that's replaced with value orientation, how do you start to do what we've gotten used to over time, which is fomenting value? How do you start to build this up step by step, chapter by chapter? Because I think those who've been practicing this for a long time recognize that it's a practice that you enact every day, right? The organizations that I've always loved, because I've been working in this domain for a long time, are those who've made some really amazing progress, not just in one fell swoop to deliver a system that changed everything, but they did it in a step by step function over and over again, finding what worked and iterating against it. In a practical context, what that then backs up to mean is that you need to find something that is a good way to start, that shows the value, but it fundamentally starts small. And I come back to two things, one of which is we measured this and said, what are the use cases that people are finding traction with quickly and why? And what we found is we said, okay, well, code generation is one. I think we know that one pretty well. And a lot of people are starting to adopt that, and that's showing up in the numbers for things like it. But the other ones that really leapt forward to us, which is exciting for folks like Alteryx to hear, is that analytical use cases were number 2 and number 3 on the list. It was actually both the summarization and the creation of these use cases. And we sat down and said, well, why? Why is it there, those first? Why isn't something else? Because there's a lot of things you can do with these capabilities. And we came down to two things. The first of which was, when you bake this technology down, when you really try and understand it at a fundamental level, it is amazing at translating one type of information to another. Oh, hey, you've got things locked up in a database and you wanted to explain it to you in English or French or Spanish. Oh, great. It's really good at doing that. Or you want it to write some code for you based off of a description you give it. Great, it's doing that too. But it's the same information, just translated with alacrity from one language to another. Okay, well, analytics is an instance of that. Right? What we're talking about is that we've got data set up and scattered throughout the enterprise, processed in different ways. I've got a system of record that speaks to customer data. I've got another system for marketing data. I've got a third system for sales data. I've got another for financial data. How do I generate an insight spanning across all of those and then make it accessible for anyone who has a question to ask, not just me as the VP asking the lead of analytics to go build a dashboard for this, which we know what that looks like, but it's costly, it's time consuming. You end up with too many dashboards. They don't say exactly what you want. What does this one mean? I don't know. Well, when you unpack that and turn it into, okay, well, wouldn't it be great if I could just ask an analytical question and get an answer? That's been a vision that really started to resonate. Even that, not simple, takes time, takes a lot of effort. So I think we see it starting to foment in really concrete use cases around, wouldn't it be great if we could ask, this particular system of record and that questions that help us arm every individual in the enterprise with information. I'll give you an example, right? I worked with a large scale retailer who said, I would love to be in a position where every one of our customer service agents knows anything that they need to based on the flow of the conversation about our products
knows how to be able to synthesize them in tandem, and can then speak to anybody who calls about that with the best possible information, whether that's how to manage a return or do these products work together nicely? What does it really mean? And yeah, that we might have that information scattered in a bunch of different places, but I want more than that. I want it to synthesize the answer. I want it to give them helpful tips on what to say, and I want that to be something that's real time. And we said, that's an amazing use case. Then that's something that you can generate purely off the basis of analytical insight. And we think that that's not only amazing, but it also offers another reason why it's such a great place to start, which is you'll notice we want our data to be at the hands of our employees. And then we want to delight our customers because our employees are ready for it. That's a really different risk profile than it is if you say, okay, I'm just going to put this on the front of my website. I mean, I know people who've done that. Generally, they've been organizations that just have a very high risk tolerance, that they're happy to say, look, any technology that comes along and helps my fledgling company out, I'm excited about. And I get that disposition. But when you're talking about some of the largest companies on earth, it's a much more attractive proposition to say, the smartest person at the company when it comes to talking to a customer is the one who's going to be looking at the answer and is ultimately going to get to make the choice of whether or not this is something that they share or don't, because your risk profile goes way, way down based on that discussion. So I tend to point in this direction and say, yeah, synthesize this for your own employees and make them better. And then utilize the information that you already have to make everyone really advance the analytical maturity.
100%. Absolutely love that. And just to further bring this to life and bring it back again to business value that we're delivering here, the real world problems that we're solving, are you able to share any other examples of how generative AI is transforming things like decision-making processes in a contemporary business right now?
Well, I mentioned this earlier, which is that it's sometimes difficult to recognize what is an AI problem and what isn't. But it almost always comes down to the same sort of discussion. So we worked with another large scale travel and hospitality company, and they have to staff up enormous organizations to run large scale entertainment venues. In this case, I think we were talking about a cruise line. So we were discussing they have to do shipboard staffing. They have to work with them extensively to plot that out. And there's an enormous amount of data that has to go into that. And they're not talking about small decisions. They're talking about basically staffing whole cities worth of employees, of cooks, of entertainers. And there's just so much data that goes into that one in terms of, well, is this particular cruise showing a high likelihood of necessarily, having high attendance and show up rates for the cruise overall? What about the employees themselves? How are we staffing up in terms of what that does? And what I found really fascinating with that is when we talk about decision-making, that was right now so tightly clustered up in a number of analytical experts who got just hammered with questions from all over the enterprise. And this was not an abnormal situation, by the way. This amazingly capable group of people would say, okay, well, we're answering all these questions. And these come from hiring managers, these come from staff, and these comes from everyone all over the organization. Wouldn't it be amazing if we could arm every one of the members of the organization that tries to make those discoveries with a dynamic set of knowledge that is really what gets me so excited about not only the moment, but Alteryx's particular disposition around it, which is one of, if we really do this right, decision-making takes off the brand that it has today of maybe 1, 2, 3 highly placed people getting an enormous amount of data and then saying, okay, we're going to go left, not right. And instead puts it into the hands of almost every individual within the organization who's making a decision about how to use resources against a much broader problem base. And that's what you want as an organization. You want to say, I really want the confidence that everybody in this organization is making decisions based on the best data available, which we have. And they're set up in a situation where they have guardrails to it, but that information is available to them. I don't like the idea that information is locked away or difficult to access or problematic to embrace. And so that moment of saying, look, how do we make sure that information is all present and mixed together in a way where it all makes sense, which is where Alteryx has spent its time forever. But moreover, now, how do we surface that in a manner that doesn't require that person to have an enormous learning curve? It comes into either the tools, the systems, or even all the way to conversation that helps.
And a few moments ago, you mentioned responsible AI. So it's a big hot topic right now. So what are the key ethical considerations and indeed governance challenges businesses should address when implementing generative AI? As I said, again, huge talking point, right?
Yeah. And how can it not be, right? As we discussed about trust earlier, right? It's one where
where you put your investments to start to really see embrace. I mean, I know how I think about it, which is that once these capabilities started to come forward, a clear arc developed in your mind of like, okay, this is the moment where it begins. We're going to have a period of time where we're excited about this. We're going to have some challenges along the way, but ultimately we're going to have this amazing capability of productivity. What's going to stand in the way of getting there? And it's going to be the preparedness and the ability for us to clearly navigate what is good, right? And that's been a difficult conversation in some cases, because immediately you start your product teams, you start your AI leaders, you start ours, and they step back and they say, yeah, what is good? What is truly responsible AI look like? And with applying ourselves to that question, we have some really bright people that we get to work with inside and outside of Alteryx. We came up with sort of the following sequence, which I think is really important. The start of which is, and this surprises people sometimes, but to completely embrace global regulation. I think this is one where when you look at not just AI, but any of the technology that has really been deployed to great power recently, I'm often really it brightens my day to see some of the efforts that come over from different countries, different standards bodies, different elements, really pushing the envelope to say, look, this is where good is going to be. We're going to define the different categories of risks that go through this, because it puts a floor under the entire industry. You can speak to a CIO, you can speak to a CDIO, you can speak to a vendor, and you know what to ask them about now. Because you say, well, hey, how do you dispose yourself? He says, the now burgeoning EU AI Act, which has undergone some of its more final revisions in principle. How do you dispose yourself that way? And I think it surprises people sometimes to hear, folks like myself say, like, regulation is great, but I think it does an amazing thing for setting a standard, which goes huge leaps for getting the industry to step forward. The next one is maybe less obvious, but I think all the more important, which is you take that regulatory disposition, and there's not one, it's global, there's different intersections, but you have to intersect it with what your company stands for. But I think that might sound trite in some circles, but it really does change a lot of the disposition if you come out and say, oh, we're a cutting edge company. We're going to be right at the edge of this state. We're going to provide people these amazing experiences. And we're going to accept that comes with some ups and downs, right? That is a perfectly valid disposition to take. And it clarifies the bargain between you, your partners, your customers, your employees of what are you here to do? What's the experience going to be? How are we going to dispose ourselves? With many others, you might be in a position to say, hey, we're a 100-year-old plus financial services institution. Everything is within our brand and the trust that our customers give us. There is no intersection when you look at this where we can take really any risk that puts that in a position that's problematic, but we have to take advantage of this technology. So let's intersect that together and state what we stand for. What you produce as artifact to that, I think, is super important. And what you come back with typically is these are the things that we stand for. And once you stand for something, once you can articulate that to your customers and your audiences at large via responsible AI policies, you can then do the final step, which is you have to implement technical controls to reinforce that. If you're about a commitment to ESG, for example, you need to evolve either by building them or partnering to get them or purchasing them. There are industry luminaries across every step. I guarantee you, for every domain of responsible, quite a few, you can find a industry luminary company. Alteryx works with several folks like Fiddler or Troj AI or Hazy. These are some amazing organizations that have taken a domain and broken it down and say, these are the tools that you need in order to make an impact by making sure that your AI or ML is measuring up by these standards. And they've done amazing work to take what could be thousands of man hours out of that one, turn it into something relatively simple to measure. But that only works if you know, again, what is good overall, and what does your company stand for? Put that together and you find it's actually a much more approachable problem overall. And that gets me excited about what we're doing in terms of responsible and what everybody can.
And we are at that magical time of year. Our news feeds are full of futurists predicting what's awaiting in 2024. And businesses and indeed as individuals, we're all looking at what we can do better next year. So with all that in mind, what are your predictions for the evolutions of generative AI in the business sector next year? And what should businesses be thinking about doing right now to prepare for some of these future developments?
I love it. Let's do it. So it's been a lot of time in the future. So fun to come up with these. I think we're about to go into a value focus period.
Yeah.
And that gives me a lot of heart. I think we've touched on it earlier, but I noted that I think one of the CIOs of, I think it was Morgan Stanley, kind of stepped out and said, I'm not going to embrace some of the deployments of generative AI until I understand the ROI behind it. And I thought that was really interesting, not because this was something weird for a CIO to say. I thought it was very much fit the role. But if you rewound the clocks a year, a disposition like that would have been very difficult to hear over the gale force wind of the adoption of this AI pattern. And to see it now and say, yeah, okay, that makes sense. I think people are making jokes about like, look how much money is going into the AI world and then goes right back out the other side to folks like OpenAI. And I think that that's going to dispose us to what is really valuable and what is not. And that's an enormously productive force that's going to get us to a great element. So I think we're going to start to step past, some of the elements of exuberance and start to get down into a value focus, which is going to be great. The second is, I think we're ahead of this, but we haven't seen as much as a breakdown of data silos. I know this has probably been a prediction on the books for years, which is like, hey, data's over here in this form, and it's over that in that form, and we're finally going to get them together in one system. I don't think the systems of record are going to change. That's why I'm actually confident about this one. I think those system of records are here to stay. But the ability for one individual at an enterprise to get an answer that spans multiple silos quickly is going to change dramatically. And I love that situation because that's where the amazing insights come together. There are plenty of things to be derived from just looking at CRM data or just looking at ERP data or just looking at any kind of single system. But the really interesting stuff that matters to our customers or our employees, comes together from multiple systems. Because every time we ship our org chart or what our systems are, your answers are partial. Your answers represent how your organization is put together, which isn't conducive to a great experience externally. What is conducive is thinking about what our customer needs. Oh, what's show me every customer who bought a product over $50 who has a store that's within a mile of their house that has products they're like to be interested in. That's a remarkably difficult query to put together because of the different things you asked all in sequence. Right? Start mixing marketing into that one and messages you sent them, and sooner or later you've just touched every system in the enterprise. But what I love is we're getting closer to a future where someone can just ask that question, and the answer takes a lot of the hard work out of it for them. So that's what gets me excited about maybe the data silos start to break down.
Well, how incredible.
Yeah.
Exciting times ahead. But now it's time to have a bit of fun with you before I let you go. Now, I'm not sure if any of your colleagues have tipped you off about this, but we've had Libby Dwayne Adams, Alan Jacobson, Vishal Soni on here in the past. I always ask my guests to share a book that means something to them. I can add to my Amazon wish list, or a song that we can add to our Spotify playlist. Guilty pleasures are allowed, but all I ask is, what are you going to leave us with and why today?
I was tipped off about this one. So anybody who knows me, maybe not the audience yet, but knows that I'm an avid reader. So I read somewhere between 100 to 120 books a year. It takes a large outlay of time. It's a great passion of mine. So I came up with not one, but 4 books that I would tell your listeners about, and I loved in the recent past. So if you're ready for those, then I love Tracers in the Dark by Greenberg. This was a story that breaks down how tech teams actually created the first traceability of cryptocurrency to catch dark web criminals. It's if you want to combine your best mystery story with a really moving technology discussion, I found it fascinating. So that one was great. The Rise and Rate of Mammals by Brissett. I love science, right?
Yes.
It's a real passion. And I think that, we typically go from dinosaurs right to the modern period, and we jump over a lot of interesting history. It's just fascinating to really break down this lovely book. For comedy, I actually read the entire story of The Big Bang Theory by Radloff. It got me to go back and watch the entire show, all 12 seasons again, which was a hoot. But and then one business book, which is obviously awesome, by Dunford. I love a good topical business book, and positioning is as an art way underappreciated. It was an amazing book talking about how you define your products by what they are, and what they are matters a lot. Those are the 4 that I teed up, but even this year got at least 96 others to show. Happy to interchange that one.
Whoa, man, you've spoiled us there. 4 books, fantastic. And we have covered a lot today. And for anyone listening wanting to find out more information about anything we talked about, maybe check out that generative AI report that or survey that you mentioned, or just contact you or your team. What's the best starting point for everything?
Yeah, it's a great one. Thanks for teeing it up. Reach out to me on LinkedIn is a great way to go. You can reach out to us at the Alteryx website. I can go alteryx.com/Aiden. Aiden is the name of our product portfolio for AI and ML. You can also even reach out to us at genAIteam@alteryx.com. So we look forward to hearing from you all.
Awesome. Well, I'll get all those links added so people can find you nice and easily. We covered so much there, from generative AI revolution, its impact on business efficiency, how organisations can ensure they're implementing and governing it correctly, and even had time to mention 4 books, which I'll add to our Amazon wish list. But just a big thank you for joining me today.
Thanks, Neil. I really appreciated the time. Look forward to it next time.
Again, huge thank you to Asa for sharing his expertise and insights on generative AI and its impact on business efficiency. I think his emphasis on the need for understanding, confidence and ethical governance in AI implementation is all invaluable. So I appreciate his time and bringing to life this enlightening discussion on how organisations can optimise and correctly govern AI technologies. But I know this is something that every business is going through at the moment. So if you've got something you'd like to share, please email me now, techblogwriter@outlook.com, Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram, just @NeilCHughes. But it's fine for me to finish off some of them Christmas nibbles now. So thank you for listening as always. And until next time, don't be a stranger.